online. And so it's really, to get started, it's my great pleasure to introduce Minister Pandor, who I worked with in 2005 when she was Minister of Education and I was a U.S. Ambassador in South Africa. Minister Pandor has an impressive record of service, and just briefly I'll touch on it, but you do have the speaker's bio in your papers. She served as a member of South Africa's cabinet since 2004. She's a 6-time cabinet minister, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Minister of Higher Education and Training, Minister of Science and Technology, twice appointed, Minister of Home Affairs, and Minister of Education. She's been a member of Parliament since 1994, the end of apartheid, and she's a member of the ANC's National Executive Committee since 2002. The minister has a PhD from the University of Pretoria, MAs in Education from University of London, and an MA in General Linguistics from the University of Stellenbosch. So I think that you'll see that we have a person of tremendous experience in front of us, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation, as well as allowing our members to engage with you. So, Minister, just to get started, I want to talk about 3 issues: South Africa-U.S. bilateral relationships, global governance in this turbulent time, as well as a question of leadership. So with U.S.-South Africa relations, I would say that some, at least on this side of the ocean, would consider that the U.S. has, had a bit of a rocky relationship with South Africa. But you're here this week getting ready to meet with President Biden. President Ramaphosa and President Biden will have their first meeting of the administration, Biden's administration. You've relaunched the South Africa-U.S. Strategic Dialogue. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about what are your goals here, what do you expect from the relationship, and to the degree that it's rocky or not, how can South Africa-U.S. relations improve?
Well, good afternoon, and afternoon to everybody who's joining us today, and thank you to the Council for inviting me to have this conversation. I don't think the relations between South Africa and the United States are rocky. In fact, they're very good. The United States is our 3rd largest trading partner worldwide, China being number 1, Europe number 2, and then the United States. And we have very, very strong links in the business sector, with a number of U.S. multinational companies having establishments that are very successful in South Africa. And we really value that relationship. Politically, we relate very well, I think probably better with the Democrats than the Republicans, but certainly very good relations. You'll all recall how President Trump described Africa, and no one has apologized for that as yet. So with United States, the country, I think there are very good established relations, which are proceeding extremely well. One of the most important links between ourselves is the support that the United States provides in the fight against HIV and AIDS in South Africa. This was a global AIDS program begun under the leadership of President George Bush, and it has really proceeded very, very well, has provided tremendous support in reducing infection levels, in making treatment available, and really works primarily through support to non-governmental organizations to actively join in the fight against HIV and AIDS. But as I said, on the international stage, we relate very well. We may not have shared perspectives on everything. We do differ. For example, we have a very strong attachment to the struggle of freedom of the people of Palestine. The United States may not share that in all sectors, and this is something that concerns us. We believe human rights should be available to everybody equally and not to some, and that if we say that we're committed to freedom, human rights, and democracy, it doesn't mean to a particular country or people, it means all over. So we tried to espouse that perspective. But I'm very glad that President Biden has invited President Ramaphosa to meet him. Our last meeting in the United States was of African presidents, heads of state, meeting President Obama several years ago, and that was the last summit that was held between African heads of state and the head of state of the United States of America. President Biden has, I think in his term in office, invited different heads of state to meet with him. And I do understand that at the end of this year, there will be a summit involving several heads of state. So we're very pleased that our president is invited for this bilateral meeting where, again, we will talk about trade. Economy is very important for us because if we don't have growth, we can't address the challenges confronting South Africa. So I believe they will focus on economic matters. They'll focus on security because the issue of insecurity and instability on the African continent, in pockets of it, is of great concern to us. And then the matter of health as well, related to pandemic preparedness. President Biden has been vocal in supporting our initiatives to have Africa do more in innovation, science, and research in order to have the ability to produce treatments on the continent, as well as diagnostic and other tools. So they will discuss health. And thirdly, we will discuss our belief in multilateralism. We strongly believe that the global multilateral institution that all of us should support and uphold is the United Nations and no other. We don't think there should be another multilateral body espoused by anyone, and we'd like to see a strengthening of the UN to play the role that it should play in ensuring world security and global development. We're disappointed with what has happened with respect to Ukraine and Russia, particularly given that Russia is a member of the UN Security Council. And this has pointed to attention needing to be given to what we've called for over many years, that is reform of the UN to make it more suited to a very different world circumstance. Very long answer to your brief question, but...
No, it's great. No, I'm going to follow up on a couple of the points. I think probably most important, it's very reassuring that you, as a Minister of International Affairs and Cooperation, view the U.S.-South Africa relationship as a constructive and positive one. I guess the perception is, even, across different administrations, whether President Mbeki, President Zuma, President Ramaphosa, or President Clinton, President Bush, Obama, et cetera. And we all know that President Trump was a bit of an outlier in terms of his approach to Africa. But there does seem to be, we disagree on issues. We tremendously cooperate, particularly within the framework of the U.S. or South Africa-U.S. strategic dialogue, which South Africa has always insisted on with each administration. And it has been an extremely useful mechanism. But there is a degree to which the tone of South Africa's rebuke of the United States is very different than the tone that we hear even with the Russia invasion of Ukraine. The principle may be the same, but the tone of when the U.S. went into Iraq, for instance, was extremely sharp and clear from South Africa, where it seems to be more muted with the Ukraine-Russia. Even the tone of, say, United States is putting draconian sanctions against the little island of Cuba, where, our people have struggled for freedom, but, as if America didn't also struggle for freedom. And so there seems to be a real sharpness and I guess that as diplomats, that sometimes reflects when you're with your friends, even when you know that they're not quite where you think they should be, it's a soft tone or a private tone, versus when it's not really friends, then it's a very public, a statement. And so that, I think, is probably where the sense, I believe, in Washington is that we are not as close friends as we should be based on the extent of the cooperation that we have with each other across so many sectors, as you just mentioned.
Well, I think relationships take place in different categories and between different sectors. So for me, what is really important is to ensure that the business-to-business relationship is strong, because that is the biggest contributor to the kind of development we wish to achieve.
Yes.
As to whether I should make a Secretary of State happy or like me, that's less important than the trade issues. That's my approach.
Yes.
And I do think there is a distinction between the support we enjoyed from Cuba during the struggle against apartheid, compared to a support that was given to UNITA by America, for example, UNITA which murdered our cadres. So there are reasons for the perspectives that exist, and one should never, I think, try to pretend that there aren't histories.
Sure.
So, you know, Russia, the Soviet Union, was prepared to provide support to the liberation movements when many governments were working very closely with the apartheid state and even murdering our leaders. So we can't suddenly, you know, forget that history and behave in a different way. But I think we've been fairly clear in our view that war doesn't assist anyone, and that we believe the inhumane actions we have seen against the people of Ukraine can't be defended by anybody, and we've not defended them, nor have we been neutral about it. We've been clear. But what we have said is that a lot of the public statements that are made by leading politicians are not assisting in ameliorating the situation, because the first prize must be to achieve peace. We've got to have a cessation of hostilities, and name-calling of one or the other, being very robust and vocal, doesn't assist us in achieving a cessation of hostilities. This is why we've said we have to make greater effort at diplomacy, greater effort at drawing the parties together. We even proposed something that was done with us when we were fighting apartheid. Many leaders said, let us put together an eminent persons group of leading personalities who enjoy global respect, who will draw the liberation movements to a table, draw the apartheid leaders to a table, and support them in negotiating an outcome that leads to democracy. This was done with us. We've said we've totally marginalized the United Nations. The Secretary General is not playing the role that he should. And we've said, let us have this notion of an eminent persons group, find a group of eminent persons, former presidents or whatever, who enjoy world respect and who'd be able to have Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky around a table and say to them, let's sit down and negotiate a settlement here.
Sure. Thank you, thank you. Let me pick up on the economic relationship. I think that's so very important. How do you see governments, our U.S. government, South Africa's government, facilitating private sector investment? And you mentioned 17% investment of South Africans into the American economy, that the United States is the third largest trading partner with South Africa. Yep. How do we build on that strength? Because as you say, that is extremely important, particularly to your three goals of unemployment, dealing with unemployment, poverty, and inequality at home.
Well, one of the matters that we have to address is increased black ownership of the broader economy in South Africa. Blacks tend to still be a minority within the robust areas of the economy. They don't own land, they don't own shares in businesses, so we've got to change that, because we cannot really live with a history where the majority are poor forever. So that has to change. And so this is why we're trying to introduce black economic empowerment. However, its introduction has gone wrong in some cases and gone well in others. So we've got to get better at it. But addressing inequality and unequal access to the resources of South Africa is something that we cannot rest at attempting to do. So that is one, is to broaden ownership and have an inclusive economy where many more participate and have a real stake. Second, I think one of the things we have to address are fairer trade rules. We do find, for example, that it seems our scrap metal is more attractive, it's value added in other parts of the world, and so we get a lower price for scrap metal and pay a great deal for steel. So we're trying to change that dynamic. And when we try and change it, non-tariff barriers are imposed on us. And so we have to engage with the Trade Secretary in the US, who I must say is a very good Trade Secretary because she listens. And we do find that even where it is claimed that trade practices are very fair, actually there's a great deal of unfairness. So attending to fairer trade rules that allow for value-added production and increased industrialization and manufacturing capacity, both in South Africa but broadly on the African continent, is a very big endeavor that all of us have to do much more on. Finally, we have AGOA, the African Growth Opportunities Act, which has been in existence for several years and has really been of great benefit to many participating African countries because it's allowed them to have goods come into the United States without a very heavy tariff. So that's been excellent. AGOA is up for review next year, and we're thrilled South Africa will be hosting the forum, AGOA Forum, and we're hoping President Biden and broadly Congress will agree that AGOA is extended further because we think it's been really incredible.
Wonderful. We do have a lot of American companies that are investing in South Africa now and contributing. Is there anything that they could do better in terms of their entry into the market? Or is there any other ways in which South Africa could do better in attracting them into the market on both sides?
Well, I think one of the issues on which there have been quite a few complaints is a law that used to exist on what was called investment protection. And what it did was it imposed a legal requirement on South Africa that it bears responsibility, so it guarantees in case of failure of some kind or any force majeure. Now, we felt that was a very unfair agreement to have, and a law which had been in existence under apartheid. So we decided to revise that particular law, and I see many companies, particularly in the United States, have complained because they liked it. But we cannot bear that guarantee. It's just something that is unaffordable for us. We think we must be fair. We must have proper security for investors in South Africa. But when we become almost an insurance company, then it's just overburdening. And that is an aspect that has been raised as a concern. Some American companies, and really from many years ago, even those that invested under apartheid, did attempt economic empowerment of black people. So your Pepsi, Coca-Cola, one or two others. You remember the Sullivan Code and those affirmative action initiatives, which did make a difference. So generally, when companies come into South Africa, they do understand black economic empowerment, probably from the history as well of the United States, and so do tend to fall in a positive way. Not all, but fall in quite well with our laws and our policy. Our labor laws are quite tight, and so we've had to look at them. I think they're particularly implementable for huge multinationals, but for smaller businesses, they're very difficult. So we've tried to look at how we change the laws without disadvantaging workers or having them exploited, in order to not compel smaller companies to become party to bargaining chamber decisions that are taken with really big companies in mind. So these are some of the sticky points that you have from time to time. But we've been absolutely thrilled. President Ramaphosa in 2019, following his election, set himself a target of 100 billion US dollars attracted into South Africa as foreign direct investment in his 5-year term. We've reached 95% of that in 3.5 years. We continue to aim at the 100 billion, but we're very pleased at the progress. And many companies from the United States have participated in new initiatives, new investments, increasing their plant presence and so on. So there's been, good progress, but we need much more.
Yeah, well, we've got Ambassador Brigidy there, and we know he's going to do the job for us. So.
The 5% is with him.
There's no question that things will get done.